Hello and welcome back to our 1v1 Arabia tier list for patch 5.8. If you haven't seen the first part of this video, I'm sure there's going to be a link in the description, so check that out because this video is going to be focused on the A tier and B tier. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So starting off, we have our A tier, where we have the civilizations that are really powerful but just don't quite make the cut to S tier. They're just not quite overbearing enough. They maybe are very weak at certain points in the game, or are severely limited in terms of their tech tree options or eco bonus options, and that's usually for these civilizations why I wouldn't put them in the S tier. But besides all of that, they're still quite powerful in many situations, and you're never, I think, really unhappy to see these civilizations. They're all pretty good. So kicking things off with civ number 10, top of A tier, you have the Magyars, which can be seen as a very similar civilization to the Huns in terms of playstyle. Kind of have that whole cavalry plus cav archery thing going on. I think the primary differences between the Huns and Magyars as far as 1v1 Arabia goes is that the Magyars are a stronger civilization than the Huns in the feudal age, and I guess like early to mid feudal age, and then in the post-imperial age. But the Huns are a better civilization at every other point in the game. So that's why I think I put the Huns a few spots higher, is because a civilization that's better in the Dark Age and Castle Age and potentially like early Imperial Age, that's going to be more useful on a game type like 1v1 Arabia, where the post-imperial age does not matter as much, and the Magyars are only like a little bit better than Huns, I'd say, in the early feudal age. If you're in like a team game situation, I think Magyars may even outshine the Huns, just because you have that sort of better guarantee that things are going to go longer. In a 1v1 situation, they just don't have an eco bonus. I mean, yeah, you have the scout discount, but that's not exactly a fantastic, long-lasting, powerful eco bonus. And that's kind of, I think, what can hamper them, is especially in like the mid-game, I feel like they can feel kind of weak. So if you compare this again to the Huns, where you have a castle age that can be dominated by your cheap cav archers and the amount of wood savings you have from not needing to build houses being most impactful at this point, the Magyars have neither of that. Their cav archers are totally generic until you get the recurve bow upgrade, at which point your cav archers are insanely good, but that's only in the post-imperial age, like I was saying. And then you don't really have that sort of wood savings. But with that said, something that I think is quite underrated with this civ is the fact that, one, they're the only civ that has fully upgraded arbalests and paladins. They're the only civilization in the game that has both of those units fully upgraded. So that's pretty cool. And I would actually say that the fact that this civilization can even go for fully upgraded arbalests is a little bit underrated, whereas the Huns obviously cannot do that. And then on top of that, you have what I would call like the easiest knights to upgrade in the Castle Age. As weird as that is to say, knight upgrades can make a very big impact in the like early to mid-ish Castle Age. And the fact that you normally want to get the defense upgrades before the attack upgrades on cavalry anyway means that in most situations, you're getting the defense upgrades. So as soon as you hit the Castle Age, you'll, assuming you have +1 attack and +1 defense, you can just pick up +2 defense and then husbandry as soon as you can afford it, and then bam, fully upgraded Castle Age knights, which are just, I can't even like begin to describe how much better that is than, say, knights without bloodlines and then only the defense upgrades. Kind of like the Ethiopians in taking archer battles, the Magyars can feel quite comfortable in taking knight battles in the Castle Age. Also, in the late game, the civilization has the Magyar Hussar, which is the only trash unique unit. Not trash in that the unit's bad, but that it can be upgraded with mercenaries to not cost gold. So you have a really nice inevitability factor, sort of further exemplifying the civilization's post-imperial age power. Following the Magyars, we have another cavalry civ with the Franks, which, frankly, are a much better civilization than they were in Age of Conquerors. So the civilization is, I think these days, known for having one of the best scout rushes in the game, right along with the Magyars. Instead of having +1 attack and being 15% cheaper, the Frank scouts are +9 HP due to the cavalry HP bonus, and they have the extra food from the faster working foragers. So it's kind of two different ways to get to similar results. This actually is slightly advantaging the Franks, I think, in that their scouts win every single scout fight in the Dark Age, because Magyars, they don't get the extra attack until the Feudal Age, and then Frank scouts are just better than every other scout cavalry, and that includes Eagle scouts, which is pretty nice to have. It lets you just take those scout fights in the Dark Age, and you're trying to micro uphill, or you're just seeing, oh god, whose power level's over 9,000 with your scout, and yeah, the Frank scouts will end up winning that, which is pretty great for them. In the mid game, Frank knights are totally serviceable. You have the free farm upgrades to help you out a little bit in terms of your boom, and then just keep on powering on that cavalry. But if you're in a situation where the Franks are up against, say, a really good camel civ like the Indians or Saracens or something, you don't have to go down the heavy cavalry line. Yes, your archery range is pretty pitiful, which is why I actually put them below the Magyars, but what you can go for is really good infantry. Franks have surprisingly fantastic infantry with fully upgraded halberdiers. You can go for like a pikeman plus monk plus siege push in the Castle Age, and that can catch a guy going for mass camels really off guard. I think it's an underrated strategy with the civilization, which is particularly compounded by the fact that they have cheap castles, which can sort of help secure your forward position quite effectively. And then that also allows you to produce throwing axemen, which are an interesting unit that is really good against trash and infantry in most situations, and also like okay against cavalry if you can take a good engagement. I think it's actually a fairly versatile unit in what it can be good against. That isn't archers. Don't make them against archers. But yeah, I think the civilization has several different options available to them. Strong start, a strong imperial age, and really they can do pretty much anything that isn't archers. So the civilization has a strong start, it has a strong finish, and it's fairly solid in between. But again, the problem comes in that your siege workshop is your archer line is and your monks are and your economy is fine. I use my good English here on this channel, you can tell. So the Franks are powerful in the early game, they're powerful in the late game, and they're serviceable in between. But again, what really hurts the civilization is they're lacking a good archery range, as well as a sort of truly powerful eco bonus to take advantage of in the mid game. Like, the faster working foragers is nice in the early game, and the free farm upgrades are nice, but there's just other stuff that other civs can do better. What kind of a human would I be if I didn't put the Britons right next to the Franks? The BFFs of history, as I'm sure most of you know. So Britons, totally different approach than the Franks, of course. They are an archer civilization, and they, I think, are best characterized by being really good in the Castle Age, but still pretty darn strong in the early game as well. So in the Dark Age, you are benefiting from the faster working shepherds. In case you guys did not know, for 1v1 Arabia, and I think most maps, for Britons, you put a villager on wood one population sooner, just because you have those faster working shepherds, so you can kind of take advantage of that to get a little bit of extra wood sort of consequentially from the faster working shepherds. And then from going from there, you have a strong men-at-arm rush, and then the faster working archery ranges means you can actually outmass your opponent's archers if you're taking at least somewhat even trades. So that's just solid feudal age from them. It's not, I would say, overwhelming, but it is still a pretty solid early game for a civilization. And then in the Castle Age, you have this civilization really shine, in my opinion. They're one of the best Castle Age civilizations in most situations. So the fact that you have 50% cheaper town centers means you are saving a ton of wood if you're trying to boom while churning out a ton of crossbowmen. So you're just saving a ton of wood in that department, and because you're saving that wood, it means you can throw down farms for a better boom and faster imperial age. So that all sort of works out quite well together. And then you, of course, most famous part of the Britons probably is the extra range for their archers, and this is just so nice. 8 ranged units are borderline broken in the Castle Age because they outrange mangonels and crossbows and skirmishers, and they're really one of the few civilizations that can just pick away at any enemy crossbows, so long as you have the micro and have the space to take the engagements. But yeah, it can be really tricky to deal with British crossbows in the Castle Age if you're, say, Vikings or something, where you just have generic crossbows, but you still want to be making the crossbows. Where the Britons can start to fall apart, though, is in the post-imperial age, where they lack very good cavalry. Well, I mean, that can hurt them in the Castle Age, too. But they just sort of lack that sort of post-imperial punch. Because, yeah, siege rams can be a huge problem for this civilization, just because they soak up so much arrow fire, and the Britons don't really have a great answer to them. And, yeah, they just don't have a very mobile, powerful, sort of population-efficient army in the late game, because their foot archers, they just kind of lose a value once everyone starts creeping up to 200 population. Though, of course, the war Ornlu Wolf trebuchets with their 100% accuracy can let you win Trev Wars, which can be a nice bonus. So at number 13, we have the Mongols, my personal favorite civilization, and it's just been fantastic since Age of Conquerors, and it's good for all the same reasons that it was in AOC, even if they have been nerfed a little bit. The civilization's claim to fame in the early game is the faster working hunters that can let you get a quicker feudal age than pretty much any other civilization in the game, just because you have that much more food more quickly. This can lead into a devastating early scout rush on, I've seen 18 pop scout rushes, not like that unfrequently. Like that's how fast you can get to the feudal age with these guys. On top of that, you can go for archers just fine. In the Castle Age, you have the option to go for cav archers, especially now that they are cheaper in the expansions, and those are going to serve you quite well as they fire faster. You have the extra HP for your light cav, which can be situationally quite useful, and then everything you're doing is sort of working towards that Mangudai in the late game, which, if you can get them out, they just kind of flatten everything. They're just really good. You also have excellent siege at your disposal, and yeah, this civilization is just, it has several different powerful options available to them. However, they really lack an eco bonus in the mid-game, and that's kind of a big problem, where a lot of other civilizations can really start to take off in terms of their economy due to powerful bonuses. In the mid-game, Mongols don't really have a whole lot going for them. Cav archers and light cav are not something you see a ton of in like the mid-Castle Ages Mongols. Usually you're like working with crossbows or knights and camels, which are somewhat generic. And then in the late game, you do miss the final archer and cavalry upgrades for those units, which can also be a bit of a problem. Without gold, the civilization is okay, but not great. Yes, your hussars are better against melee units, but they are actually worse against ranged units. And then you're missing halberdier and the last armor upgrade, like I said, for your archers. So it's not all great for the Mongol armies, but if you can take advantage of where the civilization is the strongest, you will, I think, still be quite impressed with how the civilization can perform. So rounding out our A tier, we have the Japanese, which are just a really diverse civilization in terms of different military units they can make that are well upgraded, and really held back by their lack of good eco bonus and good post-imperial age. The eco bonus part doesn't really happen until, like, you know, late feudal age, but in the early game, in the Dark Age, you actually save more wood than I think potentially any other eco bonus, just because assuming in a Dark Age situation you want to build a mill, 2 lumber camps, and a mining camp, you're saving 200 wood right there. Like, that's massive. And that can really help you execute, in my opinion, probably the single best men-at-arm into archer rush in the game. With the faster attacking men-at-arms, you win every single men-at-arm fight man for man, and you have all of that extra wood to help throw down those archery ranges that much faster. I think the problems start to come in the Castle Age, where you really start to feel the lack of eco bonus at this point. Sorry, fishing ships, unless you're playing an Arabia map that has ponds you can dock, maybe you can do a masterpiece with fishing ships with gill nets, but unless you're doing that, yeah, you're not looking at much of an eco bonus. And in the late game, you have arbalests, heavy cav archers, halberdiers, but none of those units feel particularly overbearing in the same way that a lot of the other civilizations have options that can feel very overbearing. Like, if you just look at the other A-tier civilizations, other than the Britons, all of those other civs have much more powerful late-game options, and then the Britons have a much, much stronger mid-game than the Japanese. So I think that's why I'd put them at the bottom of the A tier, but I still have to keep them in A tier just because they have so many different powerful options in terms of units they can go for. Moving right along to our B tier, this tier is what I would call the civilizations that are okay. They're, you know, the middle child of civilizations. They usually have something that can be very strong. They usually have something that can be exploited and or lack a truly powerful eco bonus. So, it's kind of a mixed bag with these civilizations, but if you roll them and don't have a terrible matchup, you usually are fairly happy to see these civilizations if you're playing random Arabia. So starting things off, we have the Indians at 15 topping off our B tier, and this civilization does not lack for powerful economy bonus. Those cheaper villagers just really save you so much food over the course of the game. For some reason, the graphic isn't actually updated to reflect their nerf, where their camels now lose the extra melee armor. They now only have +1 pierce armor. That is a change that is in the game as of recording this video, but for some reason they didn't update the graphic. But yeah, I think that is actually a huge nerf to the civilization, because it just makes you that much less overbearing in terms of being better than a generic civilization's camels against any sort of melee unit. Makes them more susceptible to swordsmen, eagles, knights. Yes, they're still really good against knights, but they're not as good, they're not as overbearing. And the fact that the civilization lacks knights can just really be a problem. If a civilization is weak to heavy cavalry, you just don't have that option, I guess, to throw at them. But what you do have, Indians, just classic, really good economy, lots of viable options in the late game that aren't the knight line. And yeah, I mean, you have nearly fully upgraded trash, you have the mighty elephant archer. Just kidding, you probably shouldn't make that unless you're against like Britons or something. Why I put the civilization in B tier as opposed to A tier or S tier, where I actually put the civilization, I believe, at number 1 in my last video 7 months ago, is they don't have knights, and the only other civilizations that not have knights have eagle warriors, which Indians don't have. And Saracens, they have knights. They have that as an option in the Castle Age, which is super crucial in an Arabia situation where the game is, again, much more skewed towards the feudal and Castle Age in terms of when most of the fighting happens. But with that said, the civilization, it's still quite powerful. It's still quite diverse, which is why I put them at the top of B tier. So coming in here at number 16 is everyone's favorite bloodline civilization, the Byzantines. And yeah, at 16, we are now halfway through all of our civilizations, and I think it's so fitting for the Byzantines to be here. I didn't actually intend for this to work out, but as it happened, as I was finalizing the tier list, I'm like, Byzantines are halfway through, and they're like the, have all the options, jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing, which I thought was pretty cool. But I actually think, this does live up to that fact. The extra HP plus free town watch means that your early game, while not being particularly well situated aggressively, is quite nice defensively. The cheaper trash units, well, spears, skirms, and camels, means that you just have a lot of good ways of dealing with archers and cavalry. And as far as anti-infantry goes, you do have fully upgraded hand cannons in the Imperial Age, as well as the deadly cataphract if for some reason you have the gold to afford that. But the civilization's real downfall is lack of eco bonus beyond the cheaper Imperial Age, which is nice, but you want an eco bonus that helps a lot in the feudal and Castle Age, Dark Age as well, kinda. But yeah, there's just no real long-term persistent eco bonus, and lack of a real sort of powerful late-game death ball-y sort of thing that isn't like cataphracts, which are so expensive. It's almost impossible to afford that in a 1v1. The fact that you have so many counter units and are so good in these sort of grindy, low gold cost situations really means that this civilization has, I think, fairly few bad matchups. It just has fairly few amazing matchups, which is why they're in the middle. So coming in at number 17, we have the Celts, which are another, solid middle-of-the-road civilization that you're never too unhappy about, but you probably aren't going to, you don't jump to the civilization if you're doing a civ draft or something. This civilization is obviously strongest with their infantry and siege. Infantry is generally not that useful past the early feudal age until you get to the post-imperial age. And of course, siege weapons are pretty difficult to make use of until the imperial age as well, unless you're talking about mangonels. So this civilization is the only civilization that has cavalry, but does not have either thumb ring or bloodlines, with the exception of the Britons, but they have good archers. So the Celts are the only civilization with cavalry that has mediocre mid-game cavalry and mediocre mid-game archers. And that sort of awkward transition period to the Imperial Age, especially, where your knights and crossbowmen really fall off, is, I think, the civilization's downfall. If any civilization has a downfall. But other than that, I mean, they have a very powerful drush due to the faster working lumberjacks being one of the best eco bonuses in the game, hands down. Faster moving infantry, again, give you one of the best drushes in the game, as you can better chase down enemy villagers or stray militia or anything like that. It's actually really nice for a drush. And yeah, they kind of have a very sort of consistent early to mid game, but then just have that really awkward period in the late castle to early Imperial Age, where you're trying to switch into Woad Raiders and Siege, but it's just a lot of expensive techs you need to get very quickly, like all at the same time, while producing those units. So that's, other than that sort of like clunky phase, they're just super powerful. Like once you get there, it's just a matter of can you get there. So at 18, we have the Malay, which is probably somewhat controversial because a lot of people think the civilization is absolutely bonkers crazy. And I think it is on Arena. I think it's probably the second most water civ, but I think it might be a little bit overrated for 1v1 Arabia. So the reason that people really like this civilization, it comes from the 80% faster age up, which if you execute, I'd say, a standard opening for Arabia, you go up with 2 extra villagers. So if you're planning on normally going up on 22 pop, you then go up on 24 pop, and then you reach the feudal age at the same time as someone who clicks up on 22 pop, if that makes sense. So you essentially get like 2 extra villagers. But the problem is, when you do hit the feudal age, you actually have less resources gathered because those 2 extra villagers haven't really had time to pay for themselves, if that makes sense. It is better economy by a little bit in the long run. It's just like right as you hit the feudal age, you actually are, I think, fairly weak, fairly susceptible in a similar way to the Chinese. If you get like lamed, for instance, you just might not have the resources to do everything you want. And because of that lack of food especially, it means like men-at-arm rushing with this civilization is quite difficult. And then on top of that, yeah, you can go for scouts, but oh boy, do they have some bad cavalry in the mid to late game. I mean, I've never been impressed with battle elephants for the Malay. I feel like they're just not that great, except in like very early Castle Age. Yeah, it's not looking good as far as their cavalry goes. Of course, you do have the Karambit Warrior, which is just, in certain situations, almost impossible to stop. Even with the nerfs, it's just so cheap, it's so cost efficient, that it can just really overwhelm several civilizations. Although if you are a civilization that has a good answer to Karambit Warriors, and there are plenty of them, you kind of can struggle for things to do. The only other like really good option you have for like a gold unit is Arbalests, where you do have fully upgraded Arbalests. But again, Arbalests can kind of lose a lot of their utility, I guess, once you start getting past like the early to mid Imperial Age. Like, just they're not that population efficient a unit, whereas like other civilizations can just be doing more powerful things at that point. However, if you do get to like the super late game, the fact that Malay have forced levy, meaning that their 2-handed swordsmen don't cost any gold to make, that's almost just instantly a game winner, unless you're against a civilization like the Magyars or something, who have something equally powerful to do. I mean, you have fully upgraded skirmishers, plus fully upgraded halberdiers, plus, an endless stream of not gold costing swordsmen. Like, that is just almost unstoppable. But like I said, it's sort of that mid-Imperial Age when you're really doing the most powerful thing your civilization has to offer. The Malay just doesn't feel that powerful. And on top of that, the sort of fragility in their early feudal age can be kind of a big problem for the civilization, as well as the lack of good knights. So that's why I kind of put them at 18. So coming in at number 19, we have the Italians, a civilization that has a lot of really solid, diverse options it can go for, but sort of lacks that overbearing strength that better civilizations have. So you have the really solid, cheaper age up. It essentially allows you to get an extra men-at-arm or an extra scout if you're going for those sorts of openings, and that sort of thing is very helpful in the early game. But the fact that you don't have any sort of eco bonus beyond that, you have no sort of long-term eco bonus. Like, this sort of thing kind of reminds me of like the Ethiopians, where you have that like initial resources saved, but you don't really have it over the long run. And then on top of that, you have no military bonus to speak of. it can mean that the civilization, despite its very broad tech tree, can feel a little generic until the post-imperial age, where you do have the cheap gunpowder units, which is nice, especially because, again, gold is such a limiting factor for 1v1 Arabia. Beyond that, condos, they're so overrated, guys. Don't make condos unless you're specifically facing a ton of gunpowder, or if you're playing like a water map, which is not the purpose of this tier list. Otherwise, Italians would be #1 because they're the best water civ. But yeah, Genoese crossbowmen, they're very slow to get going. Yes, they can be very difficult to deal with, particularly because the Italians just have a very powerful arsenal of ranged units. In the Castle Age, they fire so slowly, they're so expensive, they produce so slowly, it's just really slow to get them rolling. And that can really kind of be a deal breaker, especially if you're facing a very fast, aggressive civilization. However, the fact that you do have fully upgraded crossbows into arbalests, fully upgraded knights into cavalier, and then hussars, all of that is just totally excellent. The civilization, super flexible, like I'm saying, it just sort of lacks that sort of punch that a lot of these other civilizations have. Rounding out our B tier and this video, we have the Vietnamese, who just got a buff in the most recent patch and are way higher on the tier list because of it. So in case you guys missed the change, I talk about it in one of my recent videos, but in summary, their archery range bonus extra HP now applies all the way, like the full bonus is now in the feudal age. So that means you have 36 HP archers in the feudal age, meaning they take 2 more hits to be killed by other archers or scouts, which is like a really solid military bonus. And then in the mid game, you have 42 HP, I believe, on your crossbows. So that's 2 more hits from other civilizations' crossbows. And you still have knights with bloodlines. Yes, missing husbandry is a bit of a pain. Rattan archers are very expensive, especially compared to plumed archers, but they're an incredibly powerful, unique unit against ranged units, and they're still serviceable against melee units, especially, I think, once they got their most recent buff, where they have +5 HP in both the Castle and Imperial Age. As has been talked to death all over the internet, the civilization just really held back by their lack of eco bonus, ever, at any point in the game. Yes, maybe you can lure some extra deer because of the reveal enemy positions at the start of the game. If you're in a situation where you just can't lure your deer because they're like stuck behind a forest and they have to be lured about 1.5 miles to get to your TC, it's like nothing. You have no eco bonus at that point. To be a good 1v1 Arabia civilization, you most of the time need a very good eco bonus. But the reason I still put them in B tier and not in C tier is that, rattan archers are really good. They have a solid military bonus, and they have access to battle elephants in the late game, which all of that means that this civilization can feel quite scary in the late game. They have the Imperial Skirmisher for when gold is running low, but it's just that all of that build up, you just kind of don't feel that powerful because of lack of any sort of eco bonus, so that's why I put them at number 20. So with that will be part 2 of this 1v1 Arabia tier list video. Links in the description for the previous video, as well as the next video when I make that. So definitely leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, and yeah, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. As I said, this tier list is totally subjective, so it's not like this is the one all-knowing truth to 1v1 Arabia. I mean, it's just my opinions. So yeah, feel free to tell me why you justify other positions or whatever. And I will see you in part 3.